Hi, I'm Pastor Bill with your Maple Minute for this Tuesday, December the 22nd, 2020. We've been on a study through the book of Ecclesiastes because it's so relevant, because the wisest man to have ever lived, the wisest human that is not divine, to have ever lived, was Solomon, and he began a pursuit later in his life about the elusive meaning of life. We've been looking at it for a while, and we've noticed the futility of life and the different obstacles, and this Maple Minute, we're to discuss the futility as he searches for meaning in what we do, our work. He uses the word toil so often. In fact, he tells us three different things that we need to look at in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes. He tells us that our work does not, first of all, satisfy us. In verses 11 and 12, he says this, "Then I considered all that my hands had done," work once again. And we're not just talking about your job, but we're talking about all your efforts to do anything, even your hobbies. He says, "Then I considered all of the things that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind," trying to catch the wind. "And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can a man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done." Now, as we read through this, you may really hate the way Solomon's writing because it seems very pessimistic, very futile, but that's where his life had turned, because he's just looking at life without any hope of God now. He's in his days when he's followed other women in their worship of false gods, and now he doesn't have a solid relationship with the God of the earth, the God of that created everything, the God of the universe, I should say. He doesn't know Jehovah anymore. He's lost touch with reality. I think few men have had more professional accomplishments than Solomon had. He was a politician, and he was good at it. He was a public leader. He was an educator, a teacher. He was a scientist, and he was an economist. In fact, I don't know if he did anything else that there isn't anything that he didn't do. You see, you name it, and he probably did it. But when he took a step back from all the things that he had worked for, all the things he had done, and he viewed it objectively and evaluated, he was so disappointed. It left him feeling without any sense of permanent happiness. And that's why we find so many people today, in America especially, in the culture, having been frustrated in their work. In fact, I don't know, but maybe you've gotten tired of the way you've been treated. Maybe you get fed up and you think and contemplate about quitting, retiring, or whatever. I think that's so important. U.S. News and World Report did a statement on one years ago, and this is what they said. They said, "Today, work dominates Americans' lives as never before, as workers pile on hours at a rate not seen since the Industrial Revolution." By the way, during the Industrial Revolution, we had to make changes because there were labor laws that had to come into play because people were working incredible hours, even child labor. "Many workers are left feeling insecure, unfulfilled, and underappreciated," they went on to say. "It's no wonder surveys of today's workers show a steady decline in job satisfaction. People are feeling crushed." Now, why did I include that? I just wanted you to see that this isn't a feeling just that preachers have or in the Bible. This is a feeling of people in America today. This is a non-Christian publication telling us this as they write about it. And that's something that Solomon observed in his life, that if all I'm doing is just for the here and now, it's sort of worthless. It's like trying to grab hold of the wind. You can feel it, but you can't grab it. The next thing he notes is that our work does not separate us. And here's what we mean. In verses 13 through 16, he goes on to say, "Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly." And that's obvious. And when he uses the word folly, he's talking about foolishness. As there's more gain in light than in darkness. So he's talking as a guy who was blessed with wisdom from God, wisdom beyond anybody else's in this time period or ever been. And he says there is more profit in gaining wisdom than folly. But listen to what he says. He says, "The wise person has his eyes in his head." That's so true. He's not looking for some fantasy. He has his eyes in his head. "But the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive," and notice his conclusion, he says, "and yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them." And that event he's talking about is death. "Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance. See that in the days to come, all will have been long forgotten. And I think that's the whole issue there. He goes on to say, how the wise dies just like the fool. That's his ultimate conclusion. Solomon claims that when we see things clearly, only as they are under the sun, we will discover that that our work neither satisfies nor separates us. It reduces us all to the same level. You see, yes, there are people out there like Bill Gates who've worked so hard to get millions and perhaps even billions of dollars to his name and his company. But when he dies, he's going in the ground and he's not taking anything with it any more than I will, who I haven't gotten anything more close to that. Same with you. And that's what Solomon's understanding is. The famous preacher Harry Ironside once wrote, he said, death is the great leveler of all men. Whether rich or poor, wise or foolish, powerful or weak, renowned or obscure, no one can rise above it, cheat it, or escape its eventual claim on his life. And that's the truth here, and that's the discovery. Solomon basically saying, if this is all there is, why did I work so hard to be so wise in all my choices, decisions, the thing I did? I could have just lived like a fool, and in the end, it would have been the same. Remember, though, he's viewing life without God. That's his whole take. He goes on not only to tell us that our work does not satisfy us, it doesn't separate us, but he also tells us that our work does not succeed us. In verses 17 through 23, he goes on to say, so I hated life. Boy, that sounds miserable. For a guy that had all his wealth and wisdom and power, he says, so I hated life because what is done, my work, my efforts, under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity, worthless, and a striving after the wind. I hated all my toil or work in which I toil or worked under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Now that's sort of harsh when you think about it, because the person who comes after him in his mind probably would be his son. And he's saying, man, it's so hard. I work so hard for all these things, and I'm going to leave it to my son, and I don't even know. He may be dumb with what he's doing. And of course, he was a prophet because Rehoboam was a fool. Yet, he goes on to say, yet he will be a master of all for which I toiled or worked and used my wisdom under the sun. This is also vanity, worthless. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. It's something that wasn't worked for. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the evil of striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. Our work does not succeed us. Solomon's message here is that the accumulation of wealth doesn't produce anything that endures through time and eternity. Why do we work so hard for things that don't really matter? And that's, if there is no afterlife, if there is no God, that's really the view that Solomon has. Why am I working so hard to leave stuff behind? Why am I not enjoying life? That's why Paul tells us to set our affections on things above, not on things below, in the book of Colossians chapter 3 and verses 1 through 4. That's why Jesus told us to lay up treasures for ourselves in heaven, not here on earth. Matthew chapter 6 verses 19 and 20. I know we get so caught up in got to leave an inheritance for my kids and my children's children, but Solomon realized that if I don't have a plan to use it for God's glory, then it's sort of worthless, even if I'm leaving an inheritance to my kids, and I know that's harsh. So what's the answer? Well, Solomon doesn't leave us hanging. That's the good thing. He gives us the answer in two basic principles. First of all, he tells us that enjoyment is a gift from God. In verses 24 and 25, as he begins to wind down chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, he says, there is nothing better. So he went from hating life to there is nothing better for a person than that he should enjoy, that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. That's something we are all taught. You know, when you work hard and you've done the right thing, work can be enjoyable. And that's what he's saying. He says, this also I saw is from the hand of God. You know, God gave us work. Even before there was sin, some people don't really realize this, even before there was sin, God commanded Adam and Eve to work in the Garden of Eden. Work wasn't a toil, though. It was something to be enjoyed, and it was something to be glorying in that God gave to us. It's a blessing. He says, and that's how he's starting to realize it. He adds in the God aspect here. He said that work is something that's from God. For apart from him, that is God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? That is the truth. Solomon's conclusion is God is the essence of a positive life, and every moment of it is a gift from him. See, even under the sun, what we do have is still a gift from God. And when we start thinking about our life, how we've made a life and how we've made a living and how we've done all these things and how we've excelled, then that's a problem. See, the greatest man in his greatest achievements of wisdom and money and power and all these things has learned that apart from God, you can't have any enjoyment. That's why some of the most miserable people in the world are the rich, the famous, the people who have lived a life and obtained things without God. You know, how is important then is it for us as followers of God to keep God in the middle of our bank accounts, to keep God in the middle of all of our possessions, to keep God in the middle of all of our portfolios? You know, we are the stewards, and faithfulness is our charge, is what the Bible tells us. That means our hands should never close over the gifts that God has given us, but we need to remain open-handed so that God can use them and we can give them, and then God can refill us. That's the idea here. Enlightenment also is a gift from God, is what he finishes out. Not just enjoyment, but enlightenment. And he says this in verse 26. He tells us, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. God is the one who bestows knowledge. And Solomon hadn't forgotten that, even though he had sort of lived his life without God, he realizes, you know what? Life was so much better. Had purpose, had meaning when there was God. Because God gave me a good understanding. You know, I think that that's the hopelessness of a life without God. And lest you think I'm talking about people who've never accepted Jesus Christ, realize Solomon was a follower of God. He was faithful to God for a long time in his life, but like so many Christians, he'd let that life slip away. He started worshiping other gods, the gods of money and possessions and things. He started other relationships, so many with other women, who led him astray. He stopped worshiping in his temple, and he started worshiping in other places that God had not designated. He had idols in his life. You know, God not only gives us true enjoyment, but he also gives us true enlightenment. And that's the only place we can get enlightenment from. See, we grow in the wisdom of using God's daily blessings, and that's the truth. All truth is God's truth, and God is the bestower of truth. There is no truth apart from God. And you cannot create truth. You can only discover the truth of God. Solomon knew this. Over the book of Proverbs in Proverbs chapter number 2, verse 6, he says this, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. You know, I hope as we finish out this year in just a couple of days, a little over 2 weeks, or a little less than 2 weeks, I hope that you keep that focus on life. Life is not about the things you possess. Life isn't about the things you do, whether it's your work or your enjoyment, your hobby. Your life won't be defined by what you do, but by who is in your life. That is namely by who you worship. That is God. The answer to the question of happiness isn't work, isn't the things you do. It's to enjoy life as a gift from God and to realize that enlightenment is also a gift from God. So enjoy this holiday season and realize that your enjoyment is from God and your enlightenment is also from God. So why don't you give him thanks? Also realize that you are a steward of the things that God has given you. So as you're being blessed with many gifts over the holiday season, don't forget that we are given to give. And let's keep an open hand, not a tight fist. There are people all over the world that are going to die because they don't know who Jesus Christ is. And sad to say, there are probably even people here in Seagrove, people in Ashboro, people you work with at your office, at your job, wherever, that do not know Jesus Christ. How about we share with them the greatest gift, the gift of God?